Good morning. Ayin Beis. We're reviewing this conclusion. We're on page 1416. Actually, 1417. 1417. And moving along in the process of understanding the interface between the divine and existence, which means how we elevate existence and unite and integrate it with godliness, its purpose, the joining of the divine within existence, mamala kalalman, within it radiating sevav kalalman, the makif. So it's amshach of the divine beyond existence, which earlier in Hemshech Ayin Beis, he referred to that as Havayu Hu Elikim in the verse V'yadaita Ayim V'shavesel V'vecho Ke'Havayu Elikim B'Shamayim Emal Ol Oretz Mitochas. So that process also includes the transforming of the negative forces that emerge and are nishtalshel, evolve or devolve from the tzimtzum and din of gvura of smoil, because when you draw down from atik, less smaller bahayatika, which is higher than ches and gvura, the hu, that's tov mekulan, that higher level, that's higher than the five hu, the teva, and five hu l'ra. So you transform, like he said, gvura to chesed, or earlier he said gvura din to rachamim, which is the hu, Hashem Elokeinu b'chol ha'aretz mishpatav, as he said, shemidas rachamov la'elam. That's the expression in the medrash that he brought from Parsha Noach, that he first cited on page 1413, and now connecting it to what we've learned. And he connected that with what we say, Kol ha'oina omen yehishmei rabba, b'chol koichei, any person who responds with omen yehishmei rabba, with all his koyach. And he explained koyach, Rashi says, b'chol kavanah, all his intention. And koyach, what happens, that has the power to abolish, to eliminate, or he said, koyden le'gzar din, to tear up and eliminate all the gzar din, the din of the decree of judgment and severities. As he brought from the Gemara, Beproya bisnadvin in Bircho Hashem. I looked it up. The Rashi that he's referring to is the Rashi in Gemara Taka in Shabbos Daf Kuf Yutes 119b. Rashi says shemisnadvin levarach. Rashi also brings kiparua targum in bottle. Rashi brings that there from that the targum, I believe he brought, I think is from somewhere in Parshas in Sefer Bereshis. I don't remember, I think 28, somewhere, I think chapter 28. Rashi brings that in the Gemara. Parua metargum in bottle, and we eliminate those gzar din through what? Omen yeshmei rabba. So how does he explain that? The same idea, that the existence is created with koyach, the 28 letters of Bereshis bara lekim, which is the creation. And koyach maisav higid la'ameh. That's the structure. When you want to achieve a transformation of din to rachamim, to chesed, you're invoking the ata yigdal na koyach adnai, which is even a stronger from atik. That atik should flow into the mides of Atzilus, and therefore having the power to transform less smaller bahayatika from atik, transforming the negative, the left to the right, gvura to chesed, as he explained. And he also brought from the Seder Hayom that explains it this way: that koyach is twice 14. 14 also refers to the 14 joints in the right hand. There's 14 joints in the left. So together, right and left, is 24. But that's the regular structure, based upon Mimyad. And that also corresponds to the 24 itim, time periods in Kehelas. Again, 14 for the positive, Teva, and 14 Ra, which are rooted in the 5 the teva, the 5 letters. I'm sorry, the 5 fingers. The 5 fingers, which is the root of the 14 joints. That's all the structure of Ishtalshlus. When you want to invoke, there you're drawing from Koach Atzmus, Lav Mikol Inun Midas Iu Klal. He's completely beyond Midas. You're drawing from Atik, which is higher than Midas, and that's also Koach with a Vav, which a Vav indicates Hamshacha, that you're drawing from the Atik into the Midas, and with that transforming the Smoil to Yamin, so you have twice Yamin, Beis Pomim Yamin, as he brought. As he cites on top of page 1417, and then that's connected also, the Vav is the Bria Chatichon, the middle rod, that runs from one end to the other, from the highest to the lowest, and Yerishin and Re'achron, Midas Eis Emes, and through that, Keirin Zardin, you sweeten the Midas Adin, and you transform it into kindness. That's Chadhu, Hashem Elokeinu from Atika Kadisha, the Bris Yachid, which is Mechuvan Be'emsa in the center, as Sefer Yetzirah cites, which creates this transformation. So, with all the different details, it comes down to one key principle here. There's the structure of existence where there are kavim, there's a structure of chesed and gvura, and then when you're through a particular avodah, in this case, saying Amen Yesh Me'Rabba B'chol Koyach, you're invoking and drawing from Atik Kadisha to override and transform din to chesed. Okay. With that, let's continue reading the new paragraph on page 1417.
I have a silly question, just very quickly. Yeah, we're talking about who. Is there also any time in the Torah that it says he, like feminine?
I'm sure it does. Of course,
refers to Hashem that way. No, I mean it refers to Hashem.
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Here, the who. Firstly, the 5 times that it says who, l'teva l'ra, is not referring to Hashem. It's referring to different individuals. There's the who Hashem Elokeinu. That's the highest tov. You're referring to that. I'm assuming you're referring. So he, I am sure, talks about he as different individuals. Like we have Avram and we have Nimrod on the 2 ends of the spectrum.
No, we do refer to Hashem as the like stima, like we don't know him. Then we say Baruch Hu. That's what I mean. But that's what
the Medrash says, that the level of the who Hashem Elokeinu, that's Tov Mekulim, that's better, that's greater than them all. That's this higher level that he's referring to. Atik. The Medrash talks about who, doesn't mention he. In the Torah, I'm sure the word he is used. If it's used on God, I don't know. I would have to look it up. Okay. Vihine, new paragraph, page 1417. He's now going to explain what means b'chol koiche, b'chol kavanose, and going to connect that to Shema, to Ma'arich be'Echad. So what it means with all the kavanah. This is going to be to sum it up. I'll just sum up before we run it inside. This is going to lead us back to the entire kavanah of when a person contemplates on Shema. Remember, Shema is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, on the divine unity. So he's going to explain the divine unity all the way to the highest levels. So first, excuse me, a second. First, the divine unity in Mamala Kalaman, like Yehuda Tata. Then the divine unity in Sevav Kalaman, and then all the way to Atzmus. So all that is going to, like he says in the Maimer HaMagbi, Teira'er, leads a person to be able to harness and transform the Nefesh Elikis, to transform the oil of the Nefesh Habamis to V'haftas Hashem L'kecha B'chol Avavcha B'shnei Yitzarecha. So this is, even though he doesn't say that explicitly in this section, but it's very clearly connected to that contemplation. So what means, so now he's going to explain everything we've learned till now, which is drawing down the higher levels of a lakus into existence, the interface. we achieve through Amin Yesh Meiraba, but he said the Chol Keiche, and Rashi said the Chol Kavanah. So Chol Kavanah, Kol Keiche could also mean with your loudest voice, to say it very loudly. But Chol Kavanah means with the full intention. He's going to explain Kavanah means all the Kavanas in all aspects and all levels of Ishtalshlus and beyond to understand the divine unity. So this is going to connect it back to the Shema, to the Hisbonenus, that connects it to the theme, ultimately, of the Maimer HaMagbi, which began this whole discussion with Torah. So we'll connect it all back to there, but I just wanted to sum that up here. So if you go back, before he spoke about who, we spoke about the three levels of Ava, V'hafta, Chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, Chol Meidecha. He spoke about Mamal Kalam, Sev Kalam, and Atzmos. Ein Sof, that's higher than both. So this is all going to be part of the discussion, how we achieve those levels of connection. So remember, Mamal Kalam evokes a love for God to reveal godliness within you. Like he said, not to go out of the Kalim, the Eris in the Kalim, the Hisbonenus of Sevav Kalamin, is B'chol Nafshecha, creates Mesidus Nefesh to go outside of yourself and be encompassed in the source and give up everything of yourself and be subsumed and absorbed within the source. And Atzmus we'll talk about soon, what that means in Aveda. It will be B'chol Meidecha. But this is all part of this discussion that, as I said, connects back. Now, if you go back earlier, keep in mind also the two levels of the Ayin, the eye as it is Eris and Kelim that needs an outside Eir, and the Etzem Koach-Kavanah that can see, that will be Lasad Lavi when the Nedo Me'iris, where the eye itself will be able to see. But meanwhile, today we need the Siyua. So this is also going to be connected, because when we're still in the earlier states of connecting to godliness, we need outside support. But the neshama ultimately is rooted in the highest level, the third level, Atzmus Ein Sof, what he calls Shmoya Atzmi and Helama Atzmi. All this is going to come together as we continue learning, just keeping the main themes up front and center here. So he says, V'hinei, b'rdei sheyeh hagdolas koach hanal. In order for there to be this Hagdolas Koach, this empowering, or this Hagdolas Koach, this strengthening of power would be the best way to put it. Because remember, v'yigdal no koach adnai. So you're adding energy, more than the energy of the structure of existence. The structure of existence, the energy is chesed and gvura. So there's chesed, there's din, and judgment, which exists. Chamisha l'teva, chamisha l'ra. 5 chsadim and 5 gvuras. But then there's the kavam tzoi, the bris mechuvim be'emtza, that goes all the way up to Atik, the chad tov mekulon, that you're drawing down Hagdolas Koach, and a surge of energy coming from that higher level that transforms. So he says, how do you get to that? How do you access that? So we know you say access it through saying Ami Yesh Meiraba b'chol keiche, ze alidei b'chol keiche b'chol kavanah. So now we have to understand, how do you actually do that? What is the avodah of doing that? So yes, what's the kavanah? All that intention that allows Amin Yesh Meiraba, that you invest in Amin Yesh Meiraba, that allows it to access Atik and this Hagdolas Koach. That's what he's going to explain now. Now, earlier he said that's the level of Ishin Einai. And the Aveda that he said, so far we said Chol Nafshecha. Okay, we'll see about the Aveda soon. Okay. Chol Nafshecha, and then there's a Chol Meidecha. Va'inyan hu. Hine Amr Hazal, another Maimer Hazal. Kol ha-mayrich be'echad, mayrichin la'yoma v'shneisov. Anyone who lengthens and extends saying Echad, when we say Echad, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, so you'll see some people say Echad, or they'll say Echad, they lengthen especially the Dalet in Echad, so that's lengthening it and extending it in the actual sound. But we're going to learn how Mayrich has many different meanings, several different meanings. When a person is Mayrich be'Echad, extends and lengthens this Echad, What's the result? The person's days and years will also be lengthened. Basically, arichas Shem, that you'll live long. So the arichas of Echad leads to the arichas of a longer life. We need to understand what's arichas of Echad. What exactly does that consist of? So here he's going to go with the explanation, not Meirich as in just the physical lengthening it in sound, that you say it in an extended way, but Meirich he's going to explain is the Meirich in Kizbonanus, that you extend the contemplation on Echad, that the more you expand upon Echad, the more years, days and years it adds to your life. And he's going to explain what is this Meirich. So he says, Hineksiv. The pasuk says like this: "B'yemahu." This is in Zechariah, I believe. It says, "In that day," means la'asad love in the future. Yeh Hashem Echad u'Shmo Echad. Interesting, the word hahu is used there again. B'yemahu, who? So what does it say? It'll be Hashem Echad v'Shmo Echad. Keep in mind, Hashem Echad v'Shmo Echad was used earlier. We spoke about Shmoi, hu v'Shmoi hu is Rosh Hashanah's hu. The word hu consists of 3 letters. Hey, Vav, Aleph, hu, v'Shmoi Echad. So it's an acronym of hu, Shmoi Echad. So it says that he will be Hashem Echad, v'Shmoi Echad, and his name will be one. So we have already learned what that name is. That's the power of God to express himself. But in this context, we're talking about the Shmoi that is encompassed in Atzmus. So in the future, it will be Hashem Echad, v'Shmoi Echad. What does that mean? So Razal tell us what that means. What's it coming to negate when you say it'll be one? What other option is there? So he says, "V'amr Razal al-zeh." Razal say on this pasuk, "Otu ha'idna." This is due to the fact ha'idna means now, not b'yemahu, today. Ve'elam hazeh lav echadhu. They're not one. Why? Because when you write down Hashem in writing, it's not the same way you pronounce it. So you can't say that Hashem and Shmoi are one. In other words, you write Hashem one way, Yudke Vavke, we don't pronounce the Shem HaMeferish, we say Adnai. And I'm not even saying it the way we're supposed to say it. So Shmoi, the way the Shem Shehu Nichtav is not Kashem Shehu Nikra. That's what the Gemara said. The way it's written is not the way it's pronounced. La'asad Lave, it'll be Kashem Shehu Nichtav Kachu Nikra. The way it's written, that's the way it will be announced, it will be pronounced. V'tzarich lahavin inyan Shmoi Echad. Ma b'china Shem l'mayla. And we need to understand, what is this Shmoi Echad? Okay, we understand Hashem Echad, there's one God. What does it mean his name is one? What is this level called Shem l'mayla, above? What's it referring to when you say God's name? How is that different than you say God? And what is the significance of name? So we did learn earlier that Shem and Oyer, he connected the two, but he's going to elaborate more on this right now. Va'inyan. What is this thing called Shmoi? Now, again, I'll sum up before we read inside. Keep in mind, obviously, that God is one, that's a given. But remember, God wanted to create existence. And to create existence, you need to create another entity that has its own independent consciousness. So though Shmoi is still God's name, but it's already within so-called God, is already finding form of expression. If you just said Atzmus, without Shmoi, there was no name, there'd be no handle. You know, why do we need a name? Like we learned earlier. You don't need a name for yourself. You don't need a name. If you're the only person on earth, what do you need a name for? You don't need to call yourself by name. It's only when you want to relate to another, so they have a name, a handle to call you by. So they call you Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. So a name is essentially a relationship. It means it's the beginning of a relationship. But remember, just because God says I have a name doesn't mean there's already another existence. But he's laying the ground for the room for a Shmoi, meaning an expression of myself that someone else can relate to. So as we've learned, and we will learn, the Shmoi when it's Kol B'Atzmusei, it's completely one with Atzmus. Like he said, Hu v'Shmoi hu. He brought earlier from the Shalah, I believe. Yeah, on page 1415. And that was a Shmaya Atzmi Akol Batzmusei. But Atzmus exists obviously without a Shem. So Shem is the first step. I think he connected Shmaya Akol Batzmusei with Helama Atzmi. So you begin to see when we say, for example, we said B'chinas Achreina Sheba Atzmus or B'chinas Tachteina Sheba Atzmus. So a Shem is a good example for that because God's name is one with him. It's nothing but God. It's not someone else's name. But can you say God is defined by his name? No. You'd say his name manifests him. But he's not his name. He's beyond his name. So Shmoy itself is a B'chinas Tachtein already. It means God is already beginning. So when we know your name, for example, that your name expresses your Etzem, but your Etzem is not limited to your name. Because like I said, you don't need a name. So a name is a way of the Etzem beginning to manifest that someone else can call you and connect with you. So Lamaila, that means essentially the beginning of God. Well, beginning, I don't like, all these words are limited, but I think you're getting the idea. It's like the earliest stage where you find that God is saying, okay, I'm going to allow myself to have a name. That name will later become a name, Anoichi, Hashem, Eya, Elikecha, or Elikim, the other 7 names. There'll be 70 names, and each name is going to identify another aspect of me. But when you say, for example, Shem Kael, or Shem Elikim, or Shem Havaya, so on one hand, it's nothing but God. You don't mean, God forbid, anyone else, but Kael is a particular manifestation of godliness, of chesed. So you see, a name is an excellent example, and it's the example that Alter Rebbe gives in understanding something that's not Atzmus Mamish, but it's also nothing but Atzmus. So keep that in mind in this whole discussion as we continue learning about this. So he says, "What ma b'chinas Shem l'mayla va'inyan dihine Shem hu b'chinas Asius." When you say a name by definition means it has letters, whatever name it is, even if it's the highest name Havaya, it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Anoichi, also a name. It means something. It's letters. U'kamei Shem Avram, like the name Avram. Harikol inyan Hashem hu tzirufu Asius. The very concept of idea, the whole idea of a name means there's a combination of letters here. So you already have some type of definition, some structure, if you wish, some expression. V'ine Asius hein loshen osa. Now letters, with the letter os, Asius is plural for os. Letters. What's the word os mean? So it says it comes from the word osa, like osa boiker. It has arrived. When we say osa boiker, the morning has arrived. So osa means arrive. It's a type of channeling, a transmission. She'unyan hagili. That's the concept of a revelation. Something has been revealed. That's the word os and asius, which makes sense, because that's what letters do. If I want to express something to you, and I want to reveal my feelings or my ideas or thoughts, I need letters. The letters are like channels of expression. That's a good way of putting it. Channels of light, sometimes we say. Channels of expression. All it is a revelation from the Etzem HaNefesh. The Etzem, if I was not going to use words or letters, so there's no expression. It's inside my core. But if I'm going to express myself in some way, letters is the way I express from Etzem HaNefesh. Ha'ara ba'alma. Only a reflection. So on one hand, it's a reflection of the Etzem HaNefesh, but on the other hand, it's only a reflection. There's nothing more there but a reflection. Like, for example, letters of speech. They're only a reflection from Etzem HaNefesh. The letters themselves, when I speak letters, whatever it may be, even if I'm expressing a very deep feeling or a deep idea that's coming from my core place, but the letters themselves are only a reflection from the Etzem HaNefesh. Like I said before, you don't need a name for yourself. You also don't need these letters. It's not negeya to the person himself at all. If a person will speak many words, or he won't speak at all, that does not diminish or add anything to the nefesh. You are an intact human being, whether you speak or you don't speak. So speaking is, what does it do? It does express what you're feeling or what your Etzem is, but it's not something that adds or subtracts to you or diminishes. It's an outer expression that does not affect the very nefesh itself. Like the light and the reflection of the sun. She'ein negeil etzem hashemesh. Doesn't have any impact on the sun. If it's a cloudy day, or for whatever reason the sun is not able to shine, doesn't change the sun. The sun is still a body called sun, filled with light. Makes no difference whether it's expressed or not. Imaziv meir oiloi. It's not negate to the etzem hashemesh if the reflection radiates, illuminates, or doesn't. Because it's only ha'ara. So let me elaborate a bit. When you give something that's not a reflection, it's going to affect you. What Chassidus calls a shefa. So if I have, let's say, a pitcher of water, and I pour you some water, obviously the water is going to be affected, the source, because now I have less water. If I don't pour the water, I have more water, because you're actually giving something of substance. You're not giving a reflection. A reflection does not in any way diminish or add to the thing that it's reflecting. If you see your reflection in a mirror, it doesn't add to you, and it doesn't subtract. You see. So you're able to groom yourself. You're able to see what you look like. So all reflections are not atzmi, meaning it's not a piece of the source. A shefa is a piece of the source, so to speak. In an interesting way, which is not really relevant right now, but we'll talk about it at some point. You talk about a neshama, for example, chelik elikam mal mamish. So the question is that like a ha'ara or chelik elikah? That's why you call it chelik, because you're actually like a child that's getting the very DNA of the genetic material of the parent. A student doesn't get the genetic material. You're not getting substance. You have a mind, and the teacher is giving you a reflection of his mind. Yes, it could be very profound and great ideas, but it doesn't in any way, it's not a piece of the teacher. When parents give birth to a child, the child is getting a piece of them. Now, it's not a piece, God forbid, in a way that they're diminished, like they're giving you it's not like an organ donation in that sense, but you are getting from their very genetic material. So I'm not going to get now whether it diminishes or not, because there you could argue it doesn't diminish either. Parents don't get weaker if they give birth to a child. It's not like they're giving something of substance of them, but it is something of substance. When you say ha'ara, on the other hand, like the reflection of the sun, so it doesn't matter if the sun is shining, whether it's shining on 8 billion people or on one person, or it's not shining. It's just like if you light a candle on your table, the candle is not diminished or strengthened by the fact that it's giving off light, or whether it's not giving off light. The candle doesn't get weaker or stronger from that. That's the meaning of a ha'ara. So essentially he's saying that's what a shame is, like Oisius, like Asa. It's revealing something, but it's only a reflection because it's not impacting at all the thing it's revealing.
A candle is not shefa?
Not the light of it. The light of a candle is like the light of the sun. It's not just that as strong.
Not the light, the fire.
I don't know. The fire is, well, ner madlik ner, and it doesn't get diminished. The fire is probably more like shefa, most likely, even though it's different because you can light
it's
one
not
candle.
Diminishing.
I don't want to go into that because one candle lights another candle, and the first candle doesn't get diminished. That's clear. When you pour water from one place to another, the source does get diminished. So I don't know. That's another discussion. So let's not use the word candle if it's confusing. He's using sunlight, so we can use that. But the point is, a reflection is essentially somewhat paradoxical. It's giving you a reflection of the thing, but it's not in any way giving you the thing. Meaning it's not diminishing or strengthening the thing. We'll see how he's going to explain it. But that's so far what he said in explaining what shame is. It's not finished yet. And similar is also with the letters of speech. He gave the example of Oyer Hashemesh, the Chenu Binyan Hashem. And the same thing is with our name. She'eina negeya ela etzem. The name is not negeya to the etzem. It doesn't touch, it doesn't impact the etzem. I know you may ask the question, don't we learn sometimes in Chassidus that when a person faints and you call them by name, it awakens them? That's because the name can touch your etzem, not because it's adding to your etzem. It just wakes you up because your name is connected to your etzem. So it's like someone calling a name in a way it gets you out of your stupor or out of your comatose state. Okay. Ulechein, the Rebbe Rashab adds an interesting thing in the parentheses. Nefesh achas, one person, one soul, yila kama shemus, can have several names. The ba'odam zeh yikore b'shem zeh, ukesheba ba'odam acher, tikre b'shem acher.
Yikore.
Yikore b'shem acher. So what he means here, nefesh achas, he doesn't mean one person has many names. He means that the root, you could have a say Avram. Many people have the name Avram, and they're not necessarily similar at all. No, one second. I think I'm wrong about that. Let me read that again. One nefesh can have a number of names. That Adam Zeh Yikara B'Shem Zeh. This person. Okay. Mistake. Retract what I said. Strike it from the record. He's saying like a Gilgal. You could have a nefesh that in one lifetime, in one person, it's called Avram. And that same nefesh, when it comes into another person, tikare b'shem acher, he'll be called with a different name. So, like for example, you have Pinchas Eliyahu. So it says Pinchas and Eliyahu are come from the same nefesh, but Pinchas is not the name Eliyahu. So what do you see from that? That a name is not connected to the Etzem, because if the name was connected to the Etzem, they should always have the same name. The Ein Zeh Negei Klal Etzem HaNefesh. So you see from that, the name is not negay at all, doesn't in any way impact the Etzem HaNefesh. Because Etzem HaNefesh, in a sense, is detached from the name. However, when you give it the name reflects that. V'ayim Mashin is bar li'il me'inyan Hashem. It's telling us to look earlier in the Inyan Hashem. Earlier that I remember is the end of volume 1, where he spoke about Shem. And page, I have actually the page here. Chapter 306, page 623. I believe that was the end of volume 1, if I recall correctly. So let me read a few more lines and I'll stop for questions. That's why in Zoyar, so here's a very fundamental piece. That which in Zoyar, he calls Gili Eid Ein Sof, the revelation of divine infinite light. He calls the Zoyar, he calls it Oir. And the Gemara Medrash Rabbah, it's called Shem. You're not going to find the word Oir. I mean, you'll find the word Oir in Medrash, but not on Oir Ein Sof. So when it says a Medrash in Gemara Medrash Rabbah, Shem, why he says only Medrash Rabbah, I'm not sure. Why not Medrash in general? But that's what he says. I think he could, in the Sativ. Okay. So bottom line is that Oir and Shem, based on this, are essentially the same level. Even though they are, when you break it down, 2 levels, but right now he's talking them as the same, because Shem is like Oir, it's only a reflection. So maybe Medrash, what I just read, Medrash Rabbah, maybe he means Mem Dal Reish is not Medrash Rabbah, maybe it means Medrash. But you usually don't write it that way. Because Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar is not Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah is a particular Medrash, which is on the Chomoshim and on the 5 Megillas, that you have Bereshis Rabbah, Shmois Rabbah, Vayikra Rabbah, and so on. And then he says, Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar, the Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar, he uses the word Shmoi. Ad Shalei Nivra Elam, before the world was created, Hayahu Ushmoi Bilvad. He, Hashem, and his name were alone, the only thing that existed. So you see the word Shmoi used in Medrash, which he says is another word for the word Oyer as it's used in Zohar. Shezeh b'chinas Eir Ein Sof shebezeir v'kisvei Arizal Keneda. That level, Shmoi, is referring to Eir Ein Sof, that the way it's referred to in Zohar and Kisvei Arizal is Eir Ein Sof, as it's known. The Oyer v'Shem hu dover echad. Because Oyer v'Shem are one thing. Dahainu b'chinas ha'ora levad min ha'atzmus. They both indicate a level that's only a reflection from Atzmus. So it's not anything outside of Atzmus. It's not like the creation of a stone or the creation of another entity. It's a reflection of the thing, just like sunlight is nothing but the light of the sun, but it's only a reflection of the sun. So this is one of the key things to understand. The first step when Atzmus, so to speak, moves toward creating existence, the first thing he needs to do is move out of his own completely self-contained reality. And the first step is Oyer or Shem, as he's saying here.
But that didn't happen before Shenivra Olam. There was only a smoothie.
The Pirkei Rabbi Elazar says, "Actually, nivra adam hayahu u'shmei belvad." That's the medrash.
Yeah, but we know that Perim Shenivra Olam, there was no shame. The shame is a gilu.
What do you mean? What do you mean we know? When the medrash says there was hayahu u'shmei belvad. What do you mean we know? What do you mean we know? It says hayahu u'shmei belvad.
See this person. A gilu shame is a retzoni. This is not hoyo like Oref from Shemesh.
Okay. So what does the medrash say? Hayahu u'shmei belvad.
I don't know.
So be patient. We'll learn. We'll understand. We'll continue. Obviously, Eir is not Atzmus, but it's nothing but Atzmus, and that's the first step. Is there a level before Actually Nivra Elam? Of course there is, but we're not there yet. Right now he's talking about what is a shame, what is Eir. As I mentioned many, many times, in Torah Shalom he says that when we talk about Atzmus, we mean Eir, because we can't talk about Atzmus. What you just said, for example, that the Eir is Ritzeni, even that is already Oisius. So you're already talking about something that's some form of expression. If you want to talk about Atzmus completely beyond, we don't talk about it. It's just there. So it's correct to say, obviously, that Eir and Rotzen and everything comes after Atzmus. That's correct. It's like what says, Ke'ein shekodmo aheder. That's the expression Chassidus brings. Why is it Ke'ein? Because B'poyel, Hashem wants it. It's there always. But it's kodmo aheder because it has a cause. Oyer is rooted in Atzmus. Atzmus is not rooted in Oyer. That's what you're referring to. So that's correct. But as soon as you say anything you're talking about, we're already talking about how Atzmus is manifesting in some way. Now, when he says Actually Nivra Elam, because Elam is a creation, Yesh Ma'ayin, a creation of something. Even Actually Netzal, sometimes it says, even before Atzilus, before it was emanated. So bottom line is, therefore, Eir and Shem associate, like I said, only with Atzmus. There's nothing else that they have but a reflection of Atzmus. But it is a reflection, and therefore, yes, one step below Atzmus, so to speak, if I could call it that.
You said earlier.
Yeah.
You said earlier that
I'll stop here for questions. Go ahead.
you said earlier that shame was like the first step outside of Atzmos, and you said it might be connected to Helama Atzmi. I was thinking that really.
Well, it is connected. He said explicitly that it is. Shmoi Kol Batzmuse, he earlier referred to Helama Atzmi.
Really? Because I would think I thought the first Giloy is Etzem Or, and that Helama Atzmi is not considered a Giloy.
Well, that would mean Helama Atzmi is higher than Etzem Or. No?
Yes.
So
that's what I'm saying. That shame doesn't reach
but here,
Helama
as I
Atzmi.
said, here he's not distinguishing between the two. Right now, he's not breaking that down into Helama Atzmi or Atzmi. Here he's speaking about it all as, call it divine expression. Okay. Expression can be a Helam expression too, or it could be an expression that's revealed. Here he is clearly saying it's Gilui. He calls it gili, loshen asra shu'ina gili, because relative to atzmus, even helama atzmi, I'm adding, could also be seen not as a gili as revealed, but as an expression. Whereas atzmus is not even helama atzmi either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to distinguish like this. First of all, in general terms, he's saying here clearly Oyer and Shem are synonymous. What Zohar calls Oyer, the Medrash and Gemara Medrash call Shem. But if you break it down, and I spoke about this a few weeks ago in a class, you break it down, it seems that Oyer is more the Gili from the Etzem, and Shmoy can be more the Helama Atzmi. That's what it appears. I can't say this as a black and white definitive statement, but it seems that way. If you go back,
maybe the R is something that you can see, and Shema is something that you can hear. You just experience it in different ways.
We're not talking about. There's no seeing and no hearing anything here. This is all within.
But it's a different expression of taking it in.
Well, we're not talking yet about any type of shape and form. We're talking about here basically that from the Bilti Mitzias Nimtza, the non-existential atzmus that's completely beyond, shows, like I've said a number of times, just the idea, the concept of expression. He wants something to be expressed. That doesn't mean anything was expressed yet. These levels that we're talking here, when you say Shmoy HaKol Batzmusei, it means it's not expressed yet. It means within Kol Batzmusei, like he mentioned, I think also the word Yechelis, the capacity to express himself. So I want to be very, very careful here. That's why I'm going back to the exact language. I just want to refer you to I want to quote the exact language. When he spoke about Shmoy, let me just go back for a moment. Give me a moment here.
And you could also say like that you understand something.
Listen, please, one second. Please hold what you have to say. Let me finish what I want to say about this, because this is a very subtle area and I don't want anyone to be confused. So 1 second, just give me a few minutes here. Okay, so on page, just want to get the exact page. Yeah, on page 1407, so he spoke, there are 3 levels in Oyer, he said. Kamesha kol batzmusei, koach-Kavanah atzmi. So I don't know if you remember when we learned it. I explained it in pretty much in detail. That's Oyer, that's kol batzmusei means it's not yet Oyer. It's like saying something has the capacity to give off light, but it's not giving off light yet. He calls it Koach-Kavanah atzmi, as I explained then, completely in a potential state. Habeis kameshabab b'chinas hamshacha klolis. Then there's how becomes hamshacha klolis. Now you have something that's expressed, but it's still amorphous. And he called that koydem alei sarotz. He doesn't even have yet the arising of the desire for existence. 2. And gimel b'chinas alei sarotz. So when you talk about the Etzem HaNefesh, for example, let's take the idea that it says Ein Adam B'loi Bayis. A human being is not complete without, is not a human without a home, or Ein Adam B'loi Karka, without land. So what does that mean? It means the way we were created, from very birth, from our very conception and birth, we have within us an innate need to have a home. Then it also said, Ein Adam B'loi Isha. So each of us also has an innate need to have a partner, as Hashem created us. That the person is not complete alone. The Zocher and the Keva, male and female, both need each other, because that's the Selim Elokim in which they were created. Now, when a child is born, it doesn't feel such a need. It doesn't even know that about what a home is or what a marriage is or anything like that. And years can pass, 20 years, 30 years, more even, where a person not even aware that they want or need a home. Then there comes a point, and we learned this in Hemshech Tzadik Dalet from the Frierdiker Rebbe, We learned this a few years ago, in the end of volume 2, that then comes a stage where one day you wake up, and I don't mean one day, at some moment, and you say, you know what? I want to build a home. I need a home. So that innate rotzen that you weren't even aware of, that was in the Etzem HaNefesh, is now emerged. But what kind of home? Where? Details, there's no details yet. It could take another bunch of years where you say, okay, now I'm ready to actually build a home. Not just I want it in concept, but I'm ready to build it. And then you start the details. The Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe enumerates, if I recall, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels even, how that travels. But here's a good example how from Etzem, something starts emerging, and then it could take a while till it really manifests and is concrete and actualizes. So he says in page 1407, there are 3 levels. But here I want to refer you, and he says, he calls these 3 levels, Yachid, Echad, Kadman. And he says the Nitzes Katan, which is the soul, the Yechida of the Neshama, is the 2nd level. So Yechida comes from Yachid, which is the first, which is Nitzes Katan, Shenim B'chinas Achlein Shebebein, B'chinas Yachid Shalamaylam B'chinas Yechida. The first level, Yachid. And then he goes on to say, that's Achlein Shebe'ein Sof, and he says, Koach and Yechelis, B'Shem, and here he says, Shazel B'chinas Ha'er, B'Shem HaKol B'Atzmusei. This is the level of Er and Shem that's encompassed in Atzmusei, Mamish, Shal Zeh Emrim Shmoi Kadman Kekadmusei. Because on that level, because nothing has emerged yet, it's exactly a Kadman, meaning a first, just like God is the first. So you can't say that it is Atzmus, but you can't say it's anything but Atzmus. Like we discussed there. Why? Because the Shem is not the Ikar of Elikus, like he says. That's why it's called B'chinas Achreina. Because you can't say God is defined by his name, like we just discussed. A name is only a reflection. But it's nothing but a reflection. But here, we're not even talking about a reflection yet. We're talking the power of a reflection. That's why, that's in general Shem and Er. But then, as he moves on, he starts saying that the root of Neshamas is in Shmaya Atzmi. And I had suggested that once you get to that level, Shmaya Atzmi, Helama Atzmi, he says that afterwards. Helama Atzmi, let's see here. Yeah, on the next page, he calls it Helama Atzmi. So I suggested that in addition to Helama Atzmi, there's also Er Atzmi, meaning Er HaKol B'Atzmusei, and that's where you could say maybe there's a distinction between Shem and Er, where Shem would be more Helama Atzmi, and the Er would be Gili Ha'atzmi. Also, not an actual Gili, just the basically Yecholte Lahoyer, Yecholte Shalei Lahoyer. His capacity to express, to reveal, and his capacity not to reveal. But big qualification here. Here he's saying clearly Shem and Er are the same. So I think you have to keep this in mind. He's not discussing now the distinction between them. I added that because earlier in Ayin Beis it seemed like he was distinguishing, but it's not 100% black and white. We'll discuss more of it as we go along because there's more. He's going to say more about this. But I've been very careful watching every line in Ayin Beis how he describes it because of this issue to understand. But right now he clearly is saying they're both Gilui, even Shem. It just appears that when you start going deeper into it, there is also the element of Helama Atzmi, which he's not even mentioning here. He didn't call here Shmoy Hala Atzmi, but he did say it earlier. He said explicitly earlier.
Is Lahoyer and Shalom?
Also on page 1270, 1 second, 1270. Yeah. So on 1270, he said, Shmoy is Helama Atzmi, she'einu b'chinas er klal. So you have to say that there's 2 levels in all of this, because in some places he's saying Shmoy is higher than Er, and it's complete, and some places he says it's the same level as Er. So you have to say there are different levels. That's the only way to really explain it.
How does one? I'm sorry, Basia. I don't know what Go ahead, please.
Yeah, can we understand La Jolla and Shalom La Jolla as possibly Chesed and Gevura at that very high level?
Obviously.
I wouldn't use Chesed and Gvura in these levels at all,
Okay.
unless the Rebbe Rashab does, because Chesed and Gvura are very structured entities, and they'll just confuse them with what comes after the Tzimtzum, because there's no spheres here. He says, Lav we call in and midus iu klau. There's no midus. In Atik, we say less smaller b'hayatiki. Even in Atik, you don't say Gvura. So I would not use those expressions here. Can you say that from these will ultimately evolve later, far after the Tzimtzum levels that you could say ultimately are rooted? That you could discuss, but right now I would not use Chesed Gvura here at all.
So any mashal for La Jolla and Shalom La Jolla would be faulty in a sense, wouldn't it?
No, you have to abstract it. What's wrong with saying the capacity to give off, to reveal, and the capacity to conceal or to not reveal?
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Sounds good. Thank you.
To clarify, Rabbi, you're saying that shame is connected to Helam Atzmi and or is the Etzem or?
I didn't say that. I said here he's not distinguishing. I said that here he's calling them both the Gilui, Lashon Shoinya Gilui, and he says in Zohar is shame in Gemara and Medrash. So here he's equating. I was just saying earlier, he did make a distinction. So there you have to say that there's probably two levels. Right here, he's clearly saying it's the same thing. He says it a few times. So, but if you want to bring, I have no problem bringing in the bigger picture as he addresses it earlier. That's where I'm distinguishing shame as Helam Atzmi and Oyer as being, because he did say that. If you go back on page, what did I say, 1470, right? 1270, I'm sorry. Aleph Reish Ayin. I don't know if you have a sefer in front of you. It's critical not to do this from memory. I'm looking at every text. I want to see the exact words he uses. So he says like this. What did I just say? It says, give me a second. Let me. Aleph Tov Zayin. Okay, 1 second. Aleph Ayin Beis. Yeah. Yeah, he says Shmoi Hakol Batzmusei She'ena B'chinas Klal Ki B'chinas Yechelis. But you could also say that about that Hakol Batzmusei is also not at all. It's only Yechelis. That's why I'm being careful of how I'm articulating it.
But so we were talking about Helam Atzmi. You're saying when you just quoted from 1270, it said Yecholis. Didn't use the term Helam Atzmi. Are you saying that they're synonymous?
No, he says the Sharsham B'chinas Helam Atzmi, Hainu B'chinas Shmoi Hakol Batzmusei, She'ena B'chinas Klal Ki B'chinas Yechelis. He uses all of them together.
So the Rebbe is equating Helam Atzmi with Yecholis there, no?
Correct. But you could say that the Yechelis of Oyer is also rooted in a place that's higher than Oyer.
I always thought that Yecholis was a level after that, not as panemius as Helam Atzmi. I thought that Helam Atzmi.
1 second, but when you say you always thought,
okay, so
it's a good word, but you have to know where you got it from. Does it say it somewhere? If it says it somewhere, I'd like to see it. That's why I'm looking at exact language, because you and I were not there, so we can't guess. So if you have a place that it says that, I would like to see it. I'm not saying I'm happy to look at any text, but it has to be written. I mean, this is a bigger discussion, which I don't want to go into right now, of those levels of Yechelis, because Yechelis itself has levels. There's Yechelis in general, God's power, capacity. Then there's the level of Yecholte Lahoyer, Yecholte Shalei Lahoyer. That's already two. His capacity to give light, and they're equal because it's one capacity. It's one. So you have to always know exactly what level we're talking about in each aspect of our discussion here.
For that matter,
Right now, he's not going into breaking it down. He's right now talking Shem and Er in the general terms. So I want to stick to how he's explaining it here. And we could reserve another time. I can go into, I have given, I think, entire classes just on this topic over the years for sure, because it's an important topic. But I just don't want to confuse matters. Right now, he is saying Shem and Er are pretty much, not pretty much, he says clearly it's the same level.
Could you say that Esespheres or Genuzis are a level down from Shalol Lahoyer in the sense of Kiviyachol, the Yecholis of Oris and Kalim, the Genuz of the Esespheres? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but you know what? Like I said, I can't go through this whole map now. That deserves its own discussion. Esespheres like Genuzis is clearly lower level than this. If that's what you're asking.
Can I ask a question about reconciling this notion of Yecholos versus what we learned before in terms of the source of the neshama, or where I think we talked about that the Shem, which is who, not only refers to what you said, the capacity to reveal, but is also the shorish, the root of the neshama. It's that, isn't it the tachton Shabamaitzel? Isn't that the Hayatika? And so the question, if I'm right about those, but forgive me, we've been through a lot of nuances here. Then you have a situation where the Shem is pre-tzimtzum, it's pre-anything. It's just a capacity that he might reveal and relate to something else on the one hand, and yet in creation, or at least in creation, the shorish is something that is mamish in that is being expressed. It's not just a capacity; it is an expression. How do we reconcile those two usages of the term who?
I'm not clear. I didn't understand the question, to be honest. There's a lot of things that you mentioned, a lot of different levels. I mean, what you're asking me about the neshamas? You're asking me about who? You're asking me about the Echad? Yeah. Not clear.
Well, both. Didn't we talk about who? As
what's the exact question that you asked? Just in one sentence. What's your question?
How do you reconcile use of the term who, referring to his Shem, which is kolabatz musa, which is just within himself? It's a capacity to reveal. On the one hand,
where does it say that who is that level? Where did you say that? See that?
Then what does Shem mean? What Shem are we referring to?
Shem Shmaish, the name of God. Why? He didn't yet identify Shem as who or not. They're just saying Shmai of the Eibishter.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the problem with my question.
So it's connected. It's going to be connected to a level of who. The question is which level. Like remember, you're not talking about the who of Chesed and the who of Gvur. You're talking about who, the Tov Mekulan, right? The Chad, that's above that, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
The level of Atik that's rooted. All the way.
We call that who. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the question?
Well, if Shem is just a capacity to reveal, this Haya Atika is a.
Where do you see Atika? Atika is after the Tzimtzum, so we're not talking about Atik right now. We're talking about in the root before the Tzimtzum. So he said Hayahu V'Shmei Bilvad. So you're asking me whether that level is expression or not expression yet?
Well, I know it's not because you said it's not. He says it's a capacity at that pre-Tzimtzum level. But didn't you just say that we talked about who in reference to Hayatika? No?
Yeah, but he's not talking about Atik here. Where do you see? He's not talking about Atik. Atik is the way it manifests in Keser, like he said, after the Tzimtzum. We're talking about we're not talking about Atik right now. Even if you are, Atik is already like he said.
That's why I'm asking the question. But that's why
I'm not sure what the question. What is the question? Are we talking about Atik? We're talking about right now. What's the question? I don't understand the question.
Well, I'm going to withdraw it, but that's my point. There's a tension. There's an inconsistency in the notion of saying that Shem is just a capacity.
And where does it say Shem is not capacity? Where does it say it's not the capacity?
Didn't you just say that the shorish of the Shama is in Shem Hakol Batzmusa or no?
He didn't say it now. He said it earlier. He said that, yes.
Okay, so there we have
so
it.
What does that have to do with anything? But that's a root. That's not an expression. That's where it's rooted.
All right. Okay. That's the answer to my question. It's fine.
Also, the word neshama has shame, so it makes sense that neshama comes. It almost sounds like coming from shame. I had another, thought, because we're supposed to like crack the code of this world through the anthropomorphic humans reflecting the Tzelem Elokim. So what the Rebbe Rashab here is saying about Echad, La'arich be'Echad, that lengthens your name. If he just said earlier that Echad was the middle of the person, so maybe he could also mean in a physical sense that it when a man anyway his life is lengthened, and also
look let me just stop you a second. Commentary is very good, but it just frankly confuses me. I'm sure confuses others. These are good ideas, but it's not what he's saying here. And being that what he's saying here is so complex, if you don't mind, let me just finish. Let's first learn what he's saying here. And then I'm more than happy to hear any additional thoughts that are not being said here. So I just want to distinguish, because I'm trying to keep order here. There's a lot of issues going on here. Everybody has different ideas and thoughts. And I don't want to get lost in the whole shuffle, and especially others are also learning, and this is being recorded and people are going to learn it later. I want to just keep on theme here. The theme that he's saying here, he's explaining what is Hagdolas HaKoach, and I'm going to sum up now and we'll conclude. He's saying, what is Bekol, that how do you reach this, how do you draw from Atik and all the way from the root in the highest levels to be able to be mamtik, to sweeten the din, and to transform existence, essentially. He says it's through the kol koiche, kol kavanah. To do that, to explain that, he went to Mayrich be'Echad. So we're middle of a whole topic here, Mayrich be'Echad, and he's explaining what means Mayrich be'Echad. So to explain that, he says we need to understand what is Shmoy. Hashem Echad, Shmoy Echad. What is Shmoy? So he said Shmoy and Oyer, he said, are the same thing. What the Zohar calls Oyer, the Gemara and Medrash call Shmoy. And here we're talking about Shmoy Levad, the way it is before creation. Like it's, so on one hand, Shmoy is already something, some expression, but it's only a reflection, and it doesn't have any effect on the Etzem. I'm just summing up what we learned there. Like the light of the sun, that doesn't affect the Etzem. That's like the letters of speech. And the same thing with a name. And that's why the name is a reflection of, but it's not the Etzem, doesn't impact the Etzem. That's so far what we've learned here at today's class. What we're trying to analyze right now is other places. It talks about Eir and Shem as two levels. Are they two levels, one level? Here is for sure talking as one level. As two levels, I explained it a bit, and there's much more to talk about. I brought in neshamas and other things because that's the connection, but ultimately, being that this is, I don't want to go to a point that will just overwhelm us all. Let's get back to where we are, and then we'll get back to how he's going to explain how this connects to what we learned earlier about Shmoy Kol, about Smuse. I wanted to go there because I wanted to make sure that it's consistent with what we've been learning before. So let me just get back on track. That's where we are right now. And everything else to me right now is just going to be more confusing. So I hope you don't mind me just focusing on what we're learning.
From what I understand, we're supposed to use our bodies to understand godliness. And that's why we were created in the image of Hashem. So what does it say about when a father gives his DNA, he loses koach? What does it say about Hashem? That he loses his koach? What does it say?
I'm not sure what your question is. Why is that relevant here? But okay.
Because you asked earlier if when a person gives from his own DNA, does he lose koach? And I think it does.
Okay, but so I went away from that example. In sunlight, he doesn't. The fact is he doesn't. But the light does not add, like he said, or increase or diminish the sun. That's the main thing he wants to say here. So the shame and Oyer don't diminish or add to the Etzem. That's the key here. How it is with birth could explain it in many ways. I mean, the fact is, I don't think parents get weaker or they get diminished when they have a child. That's another story.
But it's a fact.
What?
But they do.
They do? Okay, that can be argued.
Right then and there, and then also over the course of the life. So what does that say?
People age even if they don't have children. So, I mean, that's of course. But, okay, let me stop here because it's late. I have to stop here. We're like 2/3 of the way.